It's time to ignite your soul and unlock your full potential. Join us on Beneath the Helmet, the podcast exploring firefighters' health and wellness. Hosted by retired Fire Chief Arjuna George, our podcast is the perfect place to start your journey towards becoming the best version of yourself. So come on, let's join the conversation and find out what sets your soul on fire.
All right, welcome back. This is episode number 14, Beneath the Helmet. Today, I'm joined with a true servant to the first responder community, a friend of mine, and an ambassador for coaching as a discipline for our own mental well-being. CEO and founder of First Responder Coaching, Jennifer Anderson. In this great conversation today, we explore how Jennifer found coaching and how it changed her life, as well as the life of her husband, a medically retired police officer with PTSI. She shares the importance of education and the support for first responder partners, and the impact that our partners have on our own well-being. Jennifer is also the founder of First Responder Coaching, a US-based coaching company focused on helping all first responders. And I am fortunate enough to be a part of the FRC family too, as the only Canadian-based first responder coach with FRC. To learn more about First Responder Coaching, visit firstrespondercoaching.org. That's firstrespondercoaching.org. Today's podcast is sponsored by Silver Arrow Coaching and Consulting, burnout and resilience coaching for high performers, specializing with firefighters and fire chiefs. To learn more about how Silver Arrow could support you, visit silverarrowco.com. That's www.silverarrowco.com. My first book, Burnt Around the Edges, may also be of interest to you. This book is my personal journey through burnout and mastering stress. You can order your copy at burntaroundtheedges.com or also on Amazon, Apple, and Google Books. So please enjoy this episode with Jennifer Anderson as she shares a unique view on mental health and coaching from a first responder's spouse perspective. This is a great conversation with Jennifer. Until next time, stay well. All right. Welcome, Jennifer Anderson. How are you doing today?
I'm doing wonderful. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast today.
Oh, thank you so much. For our listeners, tell us your story. Tell us who you are and what brought you to where you are today in your life.
Great. No, thank you for asking. Insanely long story cut short. Jennifer Anderson. I'm with a law enforcement spouse for 15 years here in Massachusetts, North Central Massachusetts. My husband worked in a city of about 50,000 people. And it was around year like 10-ish or so that I really was kind of like, oh, something's going on here, pushed through. And then year 15, he had a mental health break, led to a hospitalization, which, again, as we know, a few years back, there really wasn't much conversation about mental health and wellness in our first responder community. So that kind of left me hanging in terms of resources available specifically for me, but also for him, which is why I turned to coaching as a way to help me move through those challenges, help me become the mom, the wife, the woman I needed to be to get us through that really tough time. Fast forward, and now as a founder, CEO of First Responder Coaching, I'm pretty honored and humbled, really, to be bringing coaching as a modality of preventative care for the mental health and wellness community of our first responders.
Why do you think coaching is so important for responders to receive? What's different than counseling? What do you think the difference is there?
Definitely lots of pieces to that question. Typically, when you go into a clinical conversation, you're having conversations around what happened, what's gone on that has in your past affected and influenced your future, your now, what's happening, and how can you resolve those things from your experiences previously. Coaching is very different in that it is right here, right now. And that was what I needed at my time in my situation. I was looking for someone who could help me navigate the finances of our life and our family, help me to understand what I needed to do and accomplish and set up for our children within the 72-hour window, 48-hour window, and focus on me as an individual. I needed something that was going to help, again, like I said, rebuild who I was and help me understand those pieces of where our family was going and what our foundation was going to be rebuilt as. And coaching allowed for that to happen. As a generalized comment about the differences between coaching and other types of modalities is if we're starting coaching conversations from the get-go when it comes to our first responder community, we are able to lay the foundation. So when crisis happens, when trauma happens, because we all know it's not if, it's when, we're able to revert back to some of those skills and strategies of a time where we are good So that way we can move through the trauma, through the tragedy, through the experiences of a career in healthy ways. But if we don't have an actual space for those types of conversations, that we just go through life event, event, event. And next thing you know, all those events, especially in our first responder world, all those traumas lead to some really dark places and some really challenging struggles. And we know the statistics and numbers that are severely underreported when it comes to mental health and wellness in our first responder communities. My strong belief, and I know many others in our field believe very strongly, that coaching is the platform, is the modality to begin either setting a place, an actual base for conversation. Again, before, during, and throughout careers, we talk about transition. We can talk about whether the transitions of a shift change or leadership changes or those types of things. Coaching is an overarching modality that will support anyone at any time about anything that they're going through or moving through.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I think it summarized that it's a proactive measure for our own well-being, correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's good.
About of the pieces of our clinical resources, I think we've done a pretty good job of establishing clinical resources for when crisis is occurring within our first responder communities. A brief short story, if you don't mind. I had a situation with one of my coaches a few weeks ago where he was in Ohio. The person that he was coaching was in Colorado. I'm in Massachusetts. Our director of business development is in Utah. I get a message from Ohio from my coach saying, hey, it looks like this person that I'm coaching is really struggling moving into a crisis situation. What do we have for resources in Colorado? I send a text message to Utah. He texts me back, oh, we've got revival. Absolutely great. So we get the contact information, the person, and within hours, we were able to find that person some solid support in the crisis moment, which I was so incredibly proud of, that we at FRC have established that network of people that we can really get together in crisis situations. But why aren't we having the conversations before the crisis is occurring? Why are we just sitting back saying, yep, we've got these resources, so when you're in crisis, we got you. But why, okay, forgive my cheesy analogy, but why are we not the smoke detectors? Why are we just the sprinkler systems that are dousing the crisis relief when we really should be sniffing out the smoke beforehand?
Totally. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
When you were going through your challenges of finding out how you were going to find yourself and regain your balance, how did you find your coach?
Great question, actually. This is a funny story. I've been in education for 17 years. I was a high school English teacher. And I remember, again, just caving in on myself at first because just I didn't know. I reached out to a couple of therapists, some people that I was trying to connect to. I talked to admin at his department. I talked to union at his department. I reached out to a couple of the spouses of the police officers in the city. And I just came upon barrier after barrier. And ironically, a former student of mine who was an absolute sweetheart when I had her, this is 10 years before, something like that. And then I had her, well, not quite 10, but a few years before. And she reached out to me because she was working with her father using the Bob Proctor Thinking into Results program. And anyone who knows anything about self-help or improvement or, again, coaching kind of world knows Bob Proctor. He's the grandfather guru of all things personal growth. And so when she reached out to me, showing me this coaching program, showing me the Bob Proctor system, I immediately fell in love because it gave me tangible, concrete lessons, strategies. It was a formalized curriculum. So here I was as an educator,
Mhm.
love learning things on my own and doing things on my own. And I was able to move through the program. It's a 12-week program and it just, it totally changed my life. I set some goals for myself that I had never imagined I would set and accomplished them. For me, that was the game changer, right? One thing to set goals. We're always setting goals, but then how many of us actually follow through with
Mm.
when it
Totally.
really comes down to it? To go through this coaching program and achieve the goal that I had set a goal of running a 5K, which
Yeah.
to not many people might not sound a lot,
Well,
but
that's
for
awesome.
someone just buys is running. It was a lofty goal for me, and I
Well
did
done.
it. I ran a 5K with my best friend, and it was phenomenal. And that, again, when we talk about how does, so you went through a coach program, yeah, that's great, but how did that affect you? Because it gave me the confidence. It gave me the self-esteem that I needed to organize parts of my life that I wouldn't have done so ordinarily. I wouldn't have given myself the space to ordinarily organize those pieces. And so it was an awesome process. And I knew that my life was forever changed by coaching at that point.
Yeah, you bring up a good point about providing space because I think that is the golden nugget that it gives you. Because how often do we go through life and it's go? And how often do we sit there and have a chance to self reflect, look at our goals, where we want to be in life, spend an hour and have some accountability person that's listening to you and supporting you and navigating you? That's an opportunity right there alone, the benefit of coaching, right?
Yeah. It was such a juxtaposition with having my former student be my
Mhm.
coach. So that was a little bit of a strange transition. And I did work with her father a bit as well. I guess shout out to the Matrix group in Madison Rose Del Maso. Just, it was a great synergy. And I love her energy to the point that, like, we have continued to maintain in contact.
Mm.
I've done some more work with her. We talk always about continuing to be coached. Just because I am now founder CEO does not mean that I don't need coaching because I benefit from coaching all the time. And so that's one of the programs that I've continued to maintain and been in contact with and be coached by and through is through Maddie Rose coaching. So it's been an honor to continue to see that growth for myself over these last few years through coaching.
Yeah, you brought up a point about the challenges that even you as a coach need coaching. I often hear that I don't have a problem, so I don't need coaching. How would you handle that? How would you address that? And
I
what would be your
love that.
thoughts on
And
that?
actually, bring it on. I love that because I'm good, right? So guys are just like, oh, I don't need anything. I'm good right now. And then I say, okay, great. That's awesome that you're good right now, that there's nothing going on. So let's have conversations about what's going good, right? What's going good in your life, in your world right now? Let's break that down in your personal life, in your professional life, in your whatever, financial life. What is going really well? Because at some point when we talk about balance, it's gonna not be so well.
Mhm,
So what's going on that's really doing right now so we can hold on to those things. So if there's a situation in your finances, in your personal life, in your relationship, you can say, oh, but these were the things that we were using to get through when things were good. Let's see if I can employ them now when things aren't so good to help me move through them in positive ways instead of turning to nefarious other types of behaviors, some of the things that we've talked about before that unfortunately lead
mhm,
to some tragic outcomes.
for
So,
sure. Yep.
so yeah, the response on is I love it when they say, "Oh yeah, I'm good, awesome. Let's talk about what's going good right now. Let's spend half an hour, 45 an hour. Let's talk about what's going good in all these areas, so we
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
solidify them and again allow the space for the acknowledgement of what's going well instead
Mhm.
of just going through life."
Yeah. You get to peel back the onion, right? A little bit, the layers. And sure, it looks good on the outside, but once you start peeling it, you're going to find some areas that you can improve on. So that's the power of coaching for sure.
Yes. And one of those, my favorite tool to use with people who say, I'm good, is the wheel of life.
Yes. Excellent one.
At least send along the wheel of life. That's a classic, right?
Yeah.
5 different areas of your life and then your level of satisfaction within each of those areas. And there's always going to be room for improvement in
For
certain
sure.
areas for sure.
I'll make sure that's in the show notes for this episode because it's a good one. It's a classic one. It's not the new or anything, but it's holding up its test of time.
Yes, absolutely. And then it gives you the flexibility of being able to identify, again, which areas of your life you can see. It's a visual representation of where you are right now in this moment. And then gives you space, creates the space to say, okay, this is an area I'm recognizing that I'm not as satisfied in this part. So what can we do to improve that and really hone in on something that could use work? They set goals, and as coaches, we ask the powerful questions that help lead them in the direction of accomplishing goals.
Mhm. Beautiful. So we've talked about FRC a little bit, first responder coaching. how did this happen? Where was the birthplace, and how did it develop to where it is today?
Oh my goodness, that is a question. So after having gone through a coaching program myself, I've been realizing the value of what coaching looks like. Fast forward just a little bit, it was like 6 or 8 months later, a member of the church that we were attending at the time approached me and he said he had been seeing my Facebook posts and just connecting with me very briefly at church as the introduction. And he was interested in knowing if I was at all interested in a coach certification course. He had been researching, had been certified in certain coaching modalities, such as ICF and Erickson model, Assemblies of God model. And so he was putting together a coach certification course and asked if I was interested in attending. And not quite knowing what I was getting myself into, I absolutely agreed to it because I don't believe that anything like that is a coincidence. So after having my own experiences in coaching, I definitely wanted to learn too. It was a 9 month coach certification course. And I keep saying I should have my binder nearby. This binder was, it was a
Yeah,
biggie. And after that, received the coveted certification that I hang on my wall above my head.
nice.
And then from there, sat on a little while, did what I needed to do in terms of, again, rebuilding that foundation. My husband was home. What was that going to look like? He had been continuing to seek treatment for a long time. I couldn't leave him alone with our daughters. There was a lot of executive functioning skills that he needed to rebuild. Him brain, we've had a lot of conversation about traumatic brain injury of trauma. And so I was really settling in on these pieces, getting those pieces in order. And it was roughly October of 19-ish that I was, like, I'll do something with this. Not quite sure what. Let's dabble. And so I did some coaching with some law enforcement spouses in the area. And shortly thereafter, the next spring, I had established Blue Line Coaching, which was actually such an organic process. And I would talk about the process of how things play out. I knew coaching was a thing and I knew coaching was a great thing. And I knew that coaching needed to come to the larger, broader audience. And when I started actually researching coaching in the first responder world, there was nothing. You and I had a little bit of conversation around that. And so recognizing that there was nothing in the realm of coaching in our first responder culture and community, it became a pretty significant aha moment. And so from Blue Line Coaching, I connected with the National Police Wives. They connected me with a couple of women down in Washington, capital, DC. And from there, they wanted to learn how to coach. We put together a coach certification class. I went back to my buddy Paul. We put together that coach certification course. And it was so fluid. One of those coaches had a firefighter who had reached out. There had been in the line of duty death. And the chief had reached out and said, "Hey, could you come and coach some of our guys?" And I know we got blue covered, but can we cover the red? And yeah, yes, of course. And first responder coaching, it just morphed so beautifully, and connecting with first responder, connecting with departments, any sort of first responder communities and organizations that support first responders, having that level of cultural competency for us, right? We as coaches, all of our coaches are in the first responder community, either first responders themselves or spouses of first responders. That's vitally important to this community. So it's just such a been a really cool process to watch.
Beautiful.
One that's been way beyond my imagination.
I know it's reached pretty much every state across US of some sort of awareness about FRC and the coaching. And obviously myself up in Canada, I'm part of the FRC family as well. So
Yes,
very proud to be part of this movement as well. So
yes. No,
you've
thank you. Yes, the last, again, year and a half has just been a tremendous amount of growth. We have over 45 coaches that we've trained, and we are in 14 of those coaches. We got 14 states covered, and it's sky's the limit. It's been really exciting to see people understanding the place that coaching has within this community has been very just exciting, just very, we can have conversations about the ones that we didn't get to in time, right? The ones that we haven't supported the way that they've needed to be supported. But one of the most humbling, if you don't mind me sharing this story,
Please.
moments for me came when, as I mentioned, my husband's department He was on for 15 years, city of 50,000, but he was the proverbial shit magnet. He had them all. He had all of the roughest calls over his 15-year career. And as I mentioned, reaching out to them for any sort of support was just, it didn't happen, to the point that we actually had to file a lawsuit against the city because he wasn't being paid what he was supposed to be paid. Just so many stories of the lack of support for Kevin, my husband, during the process of his medical retirement and leave in medical retirement. But a few months back, we had a special guest out here in Massachusetts. Chris Hoyer came to see us, and we put together a brief presentation. Chris Hoyer, a shout out to him. He's written a book. He was a Phoenix police officer for many years and did a presentation for us locally here. And a number of departments in the area were represented, including my husband's department. And within a few days of that presentation and me getting up and talking about coaching and talking about Kevin's journey, and a lieutenant from his department reached out and said, "Hey, Jen, I've got someone I need coached. Can we do it?" And I'm,
Wow. Goosebumps, eh?
yep, goosebumps and tears. It was a full circle moment. So finally, someone in that department was willing to say, "Yep, we need this support. Let's get this guy some support and get him some coaching." So that was quite a moment.
It's like the ultimate sign of hope, right? There is hope now. Yes.
So many ways. It was
Yes.
very special.
I know you've mentioned before about your spiritual journey through developing this. Anything you want to share with the listeners about the journey of the spiritual end of things?
Seriously, I can't put into words really how many just moments, people, resources that have come together at the exact time in which we've needed it. When I mentioned an organic process, like I know, again, mind, body, spirit, like there is no way that there aren't outside forces that are supporting us in every way, shape, and form. From the get-go, one of the things that I used to do frequently when my anxiety was high was I would rub the inside of my finger, middle finger here with my thumb. And this is how I would pray. And this is how I would hold my hand. And then to have Paul, a member of our church at the time, okay, yep, all right, he's here, he's listening to me, he understands our need. We had, again, resources that I'm like, I don't know how this is going to happen, or we're gonna go for it, and they show up. One of my favorite stories about that is we were discussing the differences between our 1099 contractors and our employees, right? Making sure that we were abiding by all the rules, all laws, all regulation. And we were talking to a CPA, and she said, yeah, there's a couple pieces here that might flow into an employee situation. So why don't you start considering an HR person that might be able to help you navigate this? HR? Like what? Like I'm this little, it's me and my mother is my chief administrative officer. If you don't know Audrey yet, like the woman is a powerhouse, but the two of us and Matt is my business manager. They're like, oh, okay. And sure enough, I get a phone call a couple of days after from my long lost cousin, who I literally met once the summer before, calls me and says, "Hey, I'd like to offer my services." And I'm like, "Sure, what you got?" And she says, "Oh, I used to do HR work at my previous company."
I say, what?
What? Days. I never considered HR, never. And days later, I have this amazing human being who has joined our team and is putting so much. I can't even tell you how much effort and time and devotion she is bringing to FRC. I was actually just typing out my welcome letter for our future employee handbook, which should be released in the next couple of weeks.
Beautiful. Yep. And that's thanks to an HR expert. Eh? Yeah.
Thanks to the HR expert.
That just
So,
appeared when you needed it.
yes. So when we talk about this truly being not in one person's hands, FRC has grown so much farther than any individual. And that's something it really struck me this past year. I am a conduit. I feel like a conduit for pulling people's gifts and strengths and talents and experiences in a way that we're able to give back. We're even in the next few months, we're launching our nonprofit branch. We are launching the FRC Foundation in the next couple of months because we see the need that there is still gaps, even in what FRC is able to provide. There are still so many people that we want to be able to support through coaching that we can't through FRC. So we're launching the nonprofit. That's not me. That's not Jenny Anderson.
Yep.
This is not about Jenny Anderson. This is about people like you or Juna who are taking the time to share the resources that we have, the experiences that we have.
I love the word conduit. I think that's a perfect definition of kind of a lot of our roles, right? Is to bring the best people to do the best, what they're expert in, what they bring to the table. Utilize that, bring them all together, and you got an amazing team, right?
Absolutely can tell you without a doubt, as an educator for 17 years with no business being in business, that being here now is absolutely because of the people that I've connected with these last couple of years. People that have said, Jen, yes, let me help, let me support, let me give, because the people we are giving to are so deserving. Our the first responder community, as we all know, not exactly the easiest to navigate.
Yep.
And for them to understand, I do say the words, I appreciate you all the time to our first responders because yes, they all the heroes and they're so humble, but just the simple words of I appreciate you. I appreciate what you are bringing to FRC, what you're bringing to the world. It's just, you can't express that. I know.
Doing fantastic work at FRC, and I think the world's going to be a better place thanks to the coaches and the foundation and the organization in whole. So kudos to you and everyone else who's making this work.
Including you, sir.
So I think you have a different perspective on some mental health challenges because you're a partner of Kevin, who was a police officer and went through trauma and PTSD. And so from your point of view as a partner, as a spouse, what was some of your challenges that you had to face? Because I imagine it's a different view than somebody who physically went through it, but equally as painful, equally as challenging, equally as tough. So it'd be interesting to hear your point of view of how that was for you.
Yeah, thank you for asking that. It definitely was in terms of a challenge. I think in terms of perspectives, one of the things that I can say is one of the hardest parts was I saw the degradation over years. He was diagnosed initially with PTSD in 2015. That was about 10 years on. And I remember he went and did some basic EMDR, did a week away in a treatment facility here locally. And he came out and he was like, I'm cured. And I remember being like, even before we were talking about signs and symptoms and some of these pieces, he knew, he recognized, he was able to identify that he needed to do some work. He needed to process some of the trauma that he experienced. And we had great conversation around that. And so I believed really strongly that he felt he was cured, right? That all of a sudden, all of the weight that he had accumulated over the 10 years of his career had been lifted and he was a brand new, ready to go, back at him, ready for the job, right? Rookie almost again to an extent, right? But from 2015 to 2017 in December, when he laid on the couch for 3 days straight and cried for 3 days straight, I still saw that entire process of I'm cured, back on top of the world, lightning, fire, like hair on fire, like excitement, enthusiasm, ready to get back into the bottom of the bottom in roughly those 2 years. And so to have a conversation as a spouse and not be able to share, to help other people say, oh yeah, that's a red flag, or that's something to be concerned about. I had friends who had significant others who are not in first responding world. And so I communicate to them, hey, I noticed that Kev's been really off lately. He's not talking to me about some of the things that we would normally talk about. He can't, when I send him to the grocery store, the list of 10 things, he comes back with only 5, 6 of them. I'm like, hey, what happened? Oh, I'm a list. What do you mean? Just, we'll get him. Um, Seeing him just slowly start caving in on himself, there were moments where he could not process information beyond a 24 to 48-hour time period. If I were to try to talk to him about, hey, want to go to see some friends or concert this evening? Like, no,
Right.
why? What, like, and then if I didn't remind him in that 24 to 48-hour period of what was going on, I need you to get the girls here. I need you to do this. I need you to do that. And if I didn't consistently remind him, it was gone. Why? Because he was totally caving in on himself. He was totally starting to immediately identify the things that he was going through, imagining the flashbacks, the disassociation. I watched that man disassociate so many times, and I couldn't do anything about it. I tried to do as much as I could to talk to him about it, and he would just, it's fine. I'm fine. I'm good. Right. And then towards the end, the last couple of months before December, and I think this is actually, to rewind just a bit, I think one of the biggest turning points in his awareness was we had gone on vacation. So when he got out of the initial day in 2015, when he was first diagnosed and I'm cured, I was like, great, let's plan a vacation. And he was like, yeah, let's, because he was at the space he could process that, right? Yeah, let's do Disney. Yeah, let's go. Awesome. So as I am planning Disney for 2017, 2 years later, right? Disney's a plan. You got to plan that stuff. August of 2017, we go to Disney for 2 full weeks. His bulletproof vest, gun, uniform, that was all stayed. He kept that at work. When he came home and we went to Disney, he was Kevin. He was husband and he was father. And that was it for 2 whole weeks. And by the end of that 2 weeks, I think he had this realization of, so this is what it's like to be human, like outside of
Wow.
the job, to have my guard down, to have family. My parents came down. We had such a great time. Oh my gosh. He's always been a phenomenal father. Always, because kids are in the moment, right? Kids like to know they're here, they're present right now. Daddy, play with me. Absolutely. He would be like a phenomenal father. And those 2 weeks in Disney, I think really helped him change that perspective of who he was outside of. So when we came back from August to December, it was just plummeted.
That was the worst part, the worst time, was that time?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
He started having severe panic attacks on duty. We had this rating system. I loved rating systems because it gave us a concrete something to talk about. So, for example, in terms of his anxiety rating system, all right, 0 to 10, where's your baseline? When you're at home hanging out, we're watching TV, again, hypervigilance was a factor, and those pieces. 3 or 4 is my like base level anxiety. Okay, that's great. Let's have conversations about what a 6, a 7, an 8, and 9, and 10 will look. And then through some conversation, we determined, him and I decided that if he experiences on the job a 6 or 7, that when the call was over, he needed to call me because I wanted to be able to take him down. I wanted to help him calm down. I wanted him to be able to breathe through it. If he experienced a level 8 or 9 anxiety based on our conversations, when he was in a call, I strongly recommended that he walked away from the call. Make sure everything's safe. Make sure you've got yourself covered. The moment you can excuse yourself from a call, you do so if your anxiety level is hitting that 8 or a 9.
Right.
But either way, he'd be calling me at some point during his shift. Educator, high school teacher, I was getting phone calls at least 2 or 3 times a day, increasing over the time into December as time went on. So that, again, factors that I saw, it couldn't stop. I didn't know what to do. I didn't have the resources. So by middle of December, it was, he talked a lot about your empathy levels, right? He just couldn't take in any more, couldn't do it. So from a spousal perspective, I hope there was a couple pieces in there, some nuggets, like those were the things that I saw that I just I remember I did my best to communicate about them with him in some conversations, maybe for another time, but conversations about him really pulling back from me. I don't know if it was because he saw me as not necessarily a threat, but someone who represented his past, someone who represented his future. And that was not, those are two things he wasn't able to process. He needed the now, the here, the moment. I think had a lot to do with it. But yeah, those were some pretty challenging times. And then, yeah, it was December 14th, 15th, something like that, that he was done. He took off the uniform and put it back on.
Pretty tragic kind of story of how that unraveled and how that happened to him. I think there's some silver linings at the end of it that we can take out of that, but nobody likes to see our loved ones go through that kind of pain.
Yeah.
But I'm assuming you must have had some pain of yourself being taking care of the house because now it's almost like you're a single parent in one aspect.
And not to minimize, anything. I'd been experiencing the single parent situation for many years. When we first had children, he was on the overnights. He was 11 to 7, and that only lasted a couple of years. And then he went into the 3 to 11. So for many, it was like, remember, I think it was like 10 years, he was 3 to 11. So I was getting up with the girls, getting them to daycare while he was home, but I was getting them to daycare, whatever, so he could sleep, relax, whatever, do what he needed to do. And then I would get the girls outside of, once I got out of school, I'd have the girls all night. And then he wouldn't get home until 11. And then at that point, the girls were already in bed and settled, and we did it over and over again. So we were ships passing. So it was definitely many years of, for me, I'm so grateful that he took a lot of the household responsibilities off of my shoulders. So when it came to like cleaning and don't let this get out too far, but he came very well trained, ladies. So the laundry, dishes, he would pay the bills. He did all of that. And to a level that, again, mild OCD, that there's somewhere, I think you have to have some level of OCD to do a job well done when it comes to our first responder community. So,
True.
so things were always just, and as you bring up pain of the spouse having to experience this, yeah, it was one of my lowest moments was when I was getting phone calls from a credit card company, and I was trying to access our account online, and I didn't have the password, and I was trying to get in. I was using everything I could possibly think of. Couldn't get in. And I couldn't call him because he was in a locked facility.
Mm.
He wasn't allowed cords. He wasn't allowed his phone. How do I navigate that? That was really, that was a rough night. So those were pieces. And then also as we continued to rebuild, there were some very hard moments where at one point he stopped and he looked up at me. We were laying in bed just talking, and he was like, "Why have you stayed with me?"
Mm. Wow, it's powerful.
Have the person that you committed, you devoted your life, your family, like, to look at you and say, "Why have you stayed with me?" I was like, "Kevin, this is not your fault. This is what you are going through is not your fault. The job, the experiences, your life. This is if you had been diagnosed with MS,
Totally.
if you lost an arm, like, not your fault. And so I'm going to continue to do whatever it takes to support you, to support our family, to move through this because you're worth it. Because this wasn't your fault."
Yes, that's a great way to put it.
Thank you.
What did you do for yourself to remain balanced, remain energized enough to work through this? Is there any tips for our listeners that maybe our partners could take from it?
Yeah. One is going to roll their eyes the second I say this. Self-care, so important. But we don't realize how incredibly important it is until we're in a situation that it's literally vital. Like, and we aren't taking a step back once a week for an hour, whatever. Oh, so I realized gym actually doesn't have to be for your physical health.
Yeah, good point. Yeah.
What? People don't go to the gym for their physical health? Like, why? Like, I go to the gym for my mental health.
Right.
Because it gets me out of the house for 2 hours a couple of times a week. I do what I want. I can just walk on the treadmill, listen to a podcast, do like inspirational music. What? Like, what? I remember back in the day when you're talking about being the single mom, I felt like the second I got out of school, out of my job, I had to run to get the girls because they were my responsibility. I wasn't at work, therefore I needed to have them. I had to take care of. And it was probably a few months in when they knew Kevin had been home. We were still bringing them to daycare for quite a while after Kevin was home because, as I mentioned, we wanted to maintain that level of stability for the girls, whatever. And the daycare provider, Susan, there's no one on this planet I would have preferred to raise my children with in these times than Susan. But she says to me, she's like, "Why are you running? Why are you rushing? They're good. Like, go take an hour after work. Go do. I've got them." And I remember being like, "But no, take the hour. If you are given an hour, take the hour. Don't be afraid to like allow yourself the permission. Give yourself the permission.
That's the key word right there. Permission, for sure.
Give yourself permission. Okay, the girls are fine. They can stay and take care for another hour. She's got it. She's right. I'm going to stop at the gym on the way home."
Yeah. And the power of that is you're going to come home and you're going to be that much better of a mom, husband, parent, because you took that 1 hour for yourself, right?
Yes, and more yes. Thank you for understanding that. And it sounds so simple. And like I said, when people say self-care, they roll their eyes like,
Yeah.
"Where's self-care?" Actually give yourself permission to be like, no. And also doing something that doesn't equate to the job. So maybe this is something people can consider. Kevin was a gym rat. He was at the gym 4 even times a week because he equated the gym with getting home every night. My physical health needs to be top notch. Otherwise, I'm not going to outrun the bad guy. I'm not going to be able to do what I need to do. Probably similar, again, fire service, other types of, I'm not going to be able to fight the bad guy, or I'm not going to be able to help with that fire if you don't have that level of physical fitness. So after his mental health, after everything, after his retirement, he was medically retired in 2019. It was about a 2.5-year process. He still hasn't made going to the gym a regular pattern. He's totally chosen not to use that as a form of his own self-care. He's totally separate. We still have a membership, and he was going fairly consistently for a little while pre-pandemic, but it was nowhere near. It was nowhere near. So having outlets that you don't always associate with the job, I think is really important.
So you think that's what happened with Kevin? He associated that with his job and is like, all right, I want to separate that part of my life now. Is that what you think happened?
Because as he was no longer on the job, he's like, and I think because it was such a one, 2-part deal that when he no longer had the job, why this is no longer of as much meaning because it was tied in so closely together. Again, and that's not to say that he's let his physical health go to diminish. He is super active in other ways, but that was just something I thought of in terms of maybe making sure that you have outlets that are separate beside him.
So critical. I know for myself, I abandoned all those when I was the fire chief. I abandoned all those outlets and let them all rust up and never opened again. And it definitely paid the price for that, for sure. Yep. So having outlets and having hobbies and having stuff that's outside the fire service, the police service, whatever that is a good thing for your health, for sure.
Yeah. And having, again, even like friend groups, like that was something I do have to say, my friend group did not really consist of first responders at all. On one hand, it was a good thing. And on the other hand, it actually turned out to be a challenge because, as I mentioned, I was trying to express my concerns about what I was seeing with Kevin with some of my friends, and they didn't quite understand the gravity or the level of my concerns. And again, when we talk about the spiritual aspects of our lives, I think that the people who were really there for us at the time that we really needed them, those are the ones that stood up and said, "I'll help you. And I'm here. I've got you." Those are the people that matter the most in our lives as we move forward. You talk about friendships that come and go over time. Very interesting to think back to that time and be like, wow, these are the people who showed up.
Yeah. They're the ones that had your back, had your six, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I got your six. And again, village, right? It's the people, talks about it takes a village to raise these children. And I definitely relied on my village for quite some time there. I had to.
So you mentioned the scale of 1 to 10. I think that was a pretty powerful little tool that you guys invented and co-created.
Yeah.
Looking back on that now with the skills you've learned through coaching and that kind of stuff, what would you bring to the table now if you were going through that situation again? Anything new?
Oh my gosh, Arjuna. If I could go back, are you kidding me?
Not
I
go
would have
back.
that wish of life.
If you had to replay that all again, any tools
Oh,
that you have now that would be better or
oh my
useful?
gosh. Yeah, and that's the beauty of what I'm doing now. What I'm trying, what FRC, what we are all of us as coaches. I don't think that the connection is made necessarily for every person who is a coach who has not experienced this level of crisis in our own lives. But I really do believe that if I were to go back, like in having the tools, knowing what I know about coaching, asking the powerful questions of Kevin, not just going up to him and be like, hey, so what's your problem? Like, why can't I talk to you about that? And not that we were fighting, we never really fought. That's again, one of our weird idiosyncrasies is that we never argued, we never yelled, never screamed at each other ever. That's just not what we do. But to have the space, to have created the space for some more of the deeper conversations, I think would have changed so much of the trajectory of his career, of our marriage, of so many of those pieces. Our girls were 7 and 10 at the time of his hospitalization. And so even my 10-year-old now 16, which is crazy.
Mhm.
And so she's starting to remember some of those things and the things that I said and I did to help support her understanding. And now that she's getting older, she's asking some more questions. She's learning about obviously mental health and depression and anxiety and PTSD and all these things that she's starting to understand more. And so I was like, all right, let's use this scale. Let's have a conversation. So what's your baseline today? And so using it, I absolutely think that we could have, and again, I don't think coaching will save everyone. I don't think that coaching is going to unlock this drastic instantaneously. There's no more first responder suicide. I'm not naive. We can't save them all. And I understand that. And maybe I couldn't have, I was about to say save Kevin because we were almost at that point. He was experiencing suicidal ideation. I did ask my dad to change the lock on his gun safe because of those moments. So I could have lost Kevin. So I'm grateful that the information that I had at the time allowed me to navigate it as best as I could. But if I knew then what I know now, it would not have gotten to that degree. I feel like very strongly that we would have been able to mitigate so
Through
much.
conversation, through conversation.
Yeah.
Totally. I think conversations that nowadays it's so easy to get sucked into TV, social media, and your partner and you are sitting on the couch, not even talking to each other anymore. Yeah, when you can bring that conversation into each other and
Seamless plug.
exactly. Yep. There you go.
Shameless plug. You're
Yeah.
absolutely right. We get so caught up. We aren't having the difficult conversations, and
Mhm.
coaching empowers you with the tools to have the difficult conversations that might
Yes.
not occur otherwise.
Yeah. Beautiful. In closing, what would be some thoughts for our listeners, some nuggets that you'd love to leave with them today that might make them a better person, a better communicator, a better husband, better wife, however that looks? What would be some final words from yourself?
I think it really comes down to something that is an overarching theme of our conversation tonight, and one that I'm looking forward to continuing to promote through my work with FRC, outside of FRC, every day in and day out. And that theme is creating a space. That theme is allowing the opportunities for open dialogue, whether it's when you're sitting at a dining room table with the guys after a call and you're just open up a conversation. Hey guys, that sucked. Maybe as a spouse, having a conversation about, hey, when you get home from your shift, what can I do to help make your transition smoother so we can get you playing with the kids faster? Allowing space for the difficult conversations and not being afraid to say, hey, I'm not sure I'm comfortable with what's going on here. Hey, you just came back from the grocery store and you're missing 3 items. What's up with that? You're like, wait a minute, what's going on? Stop. What's going on? Like, how are you? Like, and not just the, it's great, you're good, but how are you? What's going on? The creation of space for that open. I hope it's helpful for
Mhm.
a message, a final closing message here.
You bring up a good point because I think there's many times that you ask how somebody's doing, they say, "Oh, great," and really, are they doing great? No, most likely not. There's something that's not perfect in their scenario.
Yes.
But yeah, I honestly think making that space, making that availability, that presence of just having that open dialogue with your partner is super critical. It's going to make it for a better marriage, better friendships, better parents as well for your kids
Yeah.
because you're on the same page. And
Arjuna, I'm going to throw that question back at you, if you don't mind. So you're
sure,
in that situation at the firehouse, you're walking by someone or even whatever, general conversation. Hey, how you doing? Yeah, I'm good, man. Okay. Like, how do you follow up with that? It's so incredibly easy to just continue to walk by that person. It's so easy to just be like, all right, let's flip on the TV. Oh, it's you're fine. You had a great day. Okay, awesome. How do we like make ourselves stop and realize, oh, wait, this is it. This is the moment I need to create the space. How do we do that?
yeah, comes back to creating that space again and not just following up with that. All right, great. I'm glad you're doing great. It's actually extend that conversation because when you start talking to that individual for even another 30 seconds more, you're going to get a lot of intel of how they are actually doing. So that'd be my thought of all our firefighters, all our police officers, when they're communicating with their personnel, their fellow officers, just having that little bit of human connection. I think you'll be able to read a lot from a conversation with another person if they're truly doing well. And my thought is I'd like to approach them now versus the phone call in the middle of the night when they're ready to jump off that bridge or commit suicide or anything worse, right? Yeah, I would prefer to have that conversation. And I think that's something that we should encourage is to just talk more. I think being vulnerable is a superpower, in my opinion. Being honest is a
Agree.
superpower.
Yes.
It's something I had to learn personally. I was very guarded for many years, and being vulnerable is a new thing to me, but I'm an open book, and it's so freeing, such a relief to be able to feel like that. And honestly, people feel that vibe back from you and they become more vulnerable, more authentic, more true. So it's like a virus, a good virus that spreads.
I could not agree more with you because you're absolutely right. It is just so easy to brush those things and not stop. And so to make that conscious effort to stop, no, really, man, Aria is so critical because you're absolutely right. There's a Facebook meme that goes around every so often, right? It's like everyone is fighting a battle that no one knows anything about, right? And so that just so speaks truth in that to give that tiny bit of opening for someone to
Mhm.
share what they're going through is powerful.
Yeah. And I think to go on that, on the vulnerability is when you share your own struggles, your own stories, which is part and parcel of this podcast, is to share stories with each other. So it opens up that space, opens up that door to say, hey, actually, I'm not doing great today. I do need some. Can we have a conversation? Can we sit down and talk?
Yeah.
If we don't talk about this stuff on a regular basis, nobody's going to feel safe enough to open up. Even if they are our brothers and sisters out in the field, it's still there's a resistance there. So when we can open up that door, feel comfortable, allow people to be vulnerable and open, it's just going to spread, in my opinion.
I agree. I look forward to seeing that spread, seeing that
Yep.
good news,
Yep.
the good news spread of open conversations that are,
Yes.
again, preventing proactive conversations. Boy, we can't sit back
Totally.
and do nothing anymore.
Totally. So how can people learn more about FRC and your vision and your mission moving forward?
Thank you. They can certainly access our website. They can certainly send me a text. They can access our Facebook group. It's a great, amazing Facebook group of support. And certainly hit me up in any one of those forms is very much welcome.
Awesome. I'll make sure all those are in the show notes as well so people can just click through and visit your site.
Awesome. Thank you
Well,
so
it's,
much.
yes, it's been an honor and I really kudos to you for your hard work in keeping your family together, and supporting your husband through all this. I'm sure he's forever grateful for that. So,
Thank you.
and then thanks for sharing your message with other partners and other firefighters and first responders, because I think the partners are equally as affected. And it's an important topic to continue supporting our partners because they are part of us. They are one of us, right? So,
Whatever we can do to support them and
yep.
support them to support our first responders.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Well, it's been an honor. Thank you so much, Jen.
Thank you, Arjuna. This is wonderful.
Fantastic. Stay well.
You too.
Thank you for tuning in to Beneath the Helmet. We hope that this podcast has provided you with valuable insights into the world of firefighters' health and wellness. Remember, caring for your physical, mental, and spiritual well-being is crucial to achieving optimal performance. Join us next time on Beneath the Helmet for more inspiring conversations. Until then, stay well.